I returned from Dubai after 8 years of silence, expecting to surprise my daughter with a hug and a suitcase full of gifts. But what I found inside the house I had bought for her made my blood turn to ice. I walked through the unlocked front door and saw my little girl Sarah on her hands and knees scrubbing a red wine stain out of the white carpet. She was not wearing the designer clothes I used to send her money for. She was wearing a filthy, torn rag that looked like it had been pulled from a dumpster. But it was the handwritten text in thick black marker across the chest of that apron that stopped my heart. It read, "Hamilton Family Maid." I stood there frozen as a man I recognized as her husband Bradley walked over and kicked her in the ribs. "Scrub harder, you useless waste," he sneered. "My mother will be here in 20 minutes, and this floor better be spotless." My hand gripped the handle of my heavy walking cane so hard my knuckles turned white. I raised the cane high above my head, ready to bring it down on his skull and end his miserable life right there. But I stopped. Because killing him was too easy. I wanted him to suffer. If you are listening to this story, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. Tell me in the comments where you are listening from. I want to know how far this story of justice has traveled. To understand why I did what I did next, you have to understand who I am. My name is Augustus Montgomery. Most people call me Gus. I am 73 years old. 8 years ago, I left Texas for the Middle East, not because I was running away, but because I had one final empire to build. I made my fortune in construction. I know how to build skyscrapers that touch the clouds, and I know how to demolish buildings until there is nothing left but dust. When I left, I bought this $2 million estate in a gated community outside Houston for my daughter Sarah. It was my parting gift. A sanctuary for her and her new husband, Bradley. I set up a trust fund. I sent money. I thought I was setting her up for a fairy tale life. I took a taxi from the airport because I wanted to see the look on her face without warning. I did not call. I did not text. I wanted it to be a surprise. As the taxi rolled through the upscale neighborhood, I noticed the other houses were manicured and pristine. But when we pulled up to the address, I knew by heart my stomach dropped. The lawn was overgrown with weeds that were knee-high. The paint on the siding was peeling. There were oil stains on the driveway. It looked like a foreclosure. It looked abandoned. I paid the driver and stood on the sidewalk with my single leather suitcase. A cold feeling settled in my gut. This was not the home of a happy young couple. I walked up the driveway, stepping over cracked pavement. I could hear the noise before I even reached the porch. Thumping bass, loud laughter. The kind of raucous partying that belongs in a frat house, not a family home in the middle of the afternoon. I reached for the doorbell, but I noticed the door was already ajar. It was not just unlocked, it was hanging open as if the security of this home meant nothing to the people inside. I pushed it open and stepped into the foyer. The smell hit me first. It was a mixture of stale beer, cheap perfume, and something rotting like garbage that had not been taken out in weeks. The beautiful oak floors I had paid extra for were scuffed and sticky. I walked into the living room, and the scene before me shattered my heart into a million jagged pieces. There were bottles everywhere, pizza boxes stacked on my antique furniture. But I did not care about the furniture. I cared about the woman on the floor. Sarah. My Sarah. She was on her hands and knees. Her beautiful blonde hair was matted and greasy as if she had not showered in days. She was scrubbing this carpet frantically, her movements jerky and terrified. Her hands were raw and red. I could see her fingernails were broken and dirty. She looked 20 pounds lighter than when I last saw her. Her collarbone protruded sharply against her skin. And then I saw the bruises. Dark, ugly purple marks shaped like fingers wrapped around her upper arms. Old yellowing bruises on her neck. Bradley was standing over her holding a half-empty beer bottle. He looked bloated. His face was puffy from alcohol and grease. He was wearing a silk robe that I realized with a jolt of anger used to belong to me. He was watching her clean with a look of pure sadistic pleasure on his face. He nudged her with his foot again, not a playful tap, but a hard shove that nearly knocked her over. "I told you to use the toothbrush," he shouted over the music. "You are lazy, Sarah. You are a lazy parasite. If you do not get this stain out, I am going to make you lick it up." Sarah did not fight back. She did not scream. She just whimpered a sound so broken and small it tore through my soul. "Yes, Bradley. I am sorry, Bradley. I will go faster." I felt a red haze cover my vision. The cane in my hand felt heavy and righteous. I stepped forward, my boots crunching on the broken glass scattered on the floor. I did not announce myself. I did not say hello, I simply swung. I hooked the curved handle of my cane around Bradley's ankle and yanked back with every ounce of old man strength I possessed. He went down like a sack of wet cement. He hit the floor hard, his beer bottle shattering and spraying foam all over his silk robe. "What the hell?" he screamed, scrambling to his knees, his face turning crimson with instant rage. "Who do you think you are?" Sarah looked up at the sound of the crash. Her eyes were wide with terror. She flinched, raising her arms to protect her face as if she expected a blow. She did not look at me. She looked at the floor, trembling. "I am sorry," she stammered. "I am sorry, I will clean it up. Please do not hurt me." She did not recognize me. She was so beaten down, so lost in her fear, that she did not even see her own father standing there. She only saw another threat. Bradley scrambled to his feet, his fists clenched, ready to fight. He turned to face me, a string of curses flying from his mouth. "You senile old bat, I am going to break your—" He stopped. The color drained from his face faster than water down a drain. His mouth hung open. He blinked once, twice, as if he were seeing a ghost. "Gus," he whispered. I stood tall, my posture rigid, my eyes locked on his. I adjusted the cuffs of my jacket and rested both hands on my cane. "Hello, Bradley," I said. My voice was low and gravelly like stones grinding together. "I see you have made yourself comfortable." He swallowed hard. His eyes darted around the room looking for an escape or maybe an excuse. Then, just as quickly as the fear had appeared, it vanished, replaced by a slick, oily smile that made my skin crawl. "Dad," he exclaimed, spreading his arms wide as if to hug me. He stepped over the mess he had made. "Oh my God, Dad, you are alive. We heard rumors that things went bad in Dubai. We thought you were gone." He laughed nervously, looking back at Sarah. "Sarah, honey, look who it is. It is your father. Get up. Stop playing around." He turned back to me, his smile widening, but his eyes remaining cold and calculating. "You caught us at a bad time, Gus. Sarah and I. We were just rehearsing." "Yes, that is it. We were rehearsing for a community theater play. It is a drama, very intense. Sarah loves acting now. Do not you, honey?" He glared at her, a silent warning shot that promised pain if she did not play along. Sarah slowly lifted her head. Her eyes met mine, and for a second, I saw a flicker of the daughter I knew. The spark of life, but it was drowning in an ocean of fear. She scrambled to her feet, wiping her dirty hands on that humiliating apron. "Dad," she whispered. Her voice cracked. "You came back." I wanted to run to her. I wanted to wrap her in my arms and take her away from this house immediately. But I saw the way she glanced at Bradley. I saw the way her body trembled. There was something else here. Something deeper than just physical abuse. There was a hook, a chain keeping her here. I needed to know what it was before I acted. I took a step toward her, but she took a step back. Her eyes darted to Bradley again. "Sarah," I said gently, "why are you wearing that? Why are you cleaning the floor while he drinks?" She opened her mouth to speak, but Bradley cut in, his voice smooth and reasonable. "Oh, Gus, you know how it is. We have fallen on hard times. The economy, my investments. We had to let the staff go. Sarah insists on doing the chores herself. She is very particular about the house. She wants everything perfect for my mother's visit. He walked over to Sarah and draped his arm around her shoulders. I saw her flinch. I saw her skin crawl, but she forced herself to stand still. His fingers dug into the bruise on her arm. I saw him squeeze. It was a threat. Smile or else. Sarah forced a smile that looked like a grimace of pain. "Yes, Dad," she said, her voice hollow. "I like cleaning. I want the house to be nice." I looked at her. I looked at the bruises. I looked at the starvation written on her face. I knew he was lying. I knew she was lying. But I needed to know why she was lying. I decided then and there to play a role. If Bradley thought I was the powerful tycoon returning to save the day, he might kill her or run away with whatever money was left before I could stop him. No. I needed him to think I was weak. I needed him to think I was no threat. I let my shoulders slump. I allowed a tremor to enter my hands. I leaned heavily on my cane, making myself look smaller, older, frailer. "I am glad to hear that, son," I wheezed, coughing into my handkerchief. "Because the truth is, I did not come back for a visit." Bradley's eyes narrowed. "What do you mean, Gus?" I looked down at my shoes, feigning shame. "Dubai. It was a disaster, Bradley. I lost it all. The construction deals, the investments, everything. The partners cheated me. I have nothing left. The shirt on my back and this suitcase is all I own. I came back because I have nowhere else to go. I need a place to stay. I need help." I watched Bradley's face carefully. I saw the disappointment first. He had been hoping for a payout. Then I saw the contempt. He looked at me the way a wolf looks at a wounded deer. A burden. A nuisance. But then a new light entered his eyes. A cruel spark of opportunity. He looked at Sarah, then back at me. "Well, Gus," he said, his voice losing all its fake warmth. "That is a problem. We are running a tight ship here. We do not have room for freeloaders." Sarah gasped. "Bradley, he is my father." He silenced her with a look. But Bradley continued, stroking his chin. "Family is family, right? You can stay, Gus. But things are different now. I am the man of the house. And in this house, everyone pulls their weight. If you want a roof over your head, you will have to earn it, just like Sarah does." I nodded, keeping my head down to hide the fire in my eyes. "I understand, Bradley. I can work. I just need a bed." "Good," he said. "You can take the shed in the backyard. The gardening tools are in there, but there is space for a cot. And Gus, do not expect us to wait on you hand and foot. Sarah has enough to do serving me." He turned back to Sarah and shoved her toward the kitchen. "Get me another beer," he barked. "And get your father a glass of tap water. He looks thirsty. And take that ridiculous apron off before my mother gets here. Actually keep it on. She will appreciate knowing you finally learned your place." Sarah hurried to the kitchen, limping slightly. I watched her go, my heart burning with a mixture of grief and fury. I shuffled toward the kitchen, following her. When we were out of earshot behind the swinging doors, I grabbed her arm gently. She jumped, almost dropping the glass of water. "Sarah," I whispered. "Look at me. Why are you doing this? Why are you letting him treat you like an animal? You have a degree. You are smart. Why don't you leave?" She looked at the door, terrified that Bradley might walk in. She leaned in close, her breath smelling of hunger and fear. "Dad, you have to leave," she hissed, tears welling up in her eyes. "You do not understand. You cannot be here." "Why, Sarah? Tell me." She looked over her shoulder, then whispered the words that unlocked the whole mystery. "He has the papers, Dad. He says you owe them money, $5 million. He says when you left the country, you embezzled it from his family's investment fund. He has documents with your signature. He says if I try to leave, or if I call the police, he will turn the documents over to the FBI. He says he will send you to federal prison for the rest of your life. I stared at her, stunned by the audacity of the lie. He says he is being generous by letting me work it off, she sobbed. He says every day I scrub the floor, every day I serve his mother is one less day you have to spend in a cell. I am doing it for you, Dad. I am paying your debt. I felt a physical blow to my chest. It was not just abuse. It was extortion. It was a hostage situation. Bradley had constructed a masterful lie using my absence and silence against me. He had convinced my daughter that her slavery was the only thing keeping her father free. He had turned her love for me into a chain around her neck. I gripped her shoulders. Sarah, listen to me. I need you to be brave. Is that true? Did you sign anything? She shook her head. No. But he showed me the papers, the bank transfers. It looks real, Dad. I took a deep breath. I looked into her eyes, channeling all the strength I had left. Sarah, I need you to trust me. Do not let him know we had this conversation. Go back out there. Serve him his beer. Do exactly what he says. Can you do that for me? But Dad, the money. There is no money, Sarah. I lied, protecting her from the truth for just a little longer. I am broke, remember? But I am still your father, and I am going to fix this. But you have to play the part. We are both going to play the part. She nodded, wiping her eyes. Okay, Dad. Go, I said, giving her a gentle push. She walked back out into the living room, her head bowed, her spirit broken, but a tiny flicker of hope reignited in her eyes. I stood in the kitchen alone for a moment. I pulled my old flip phone from my pocket. It looked like a piece of junk, but it was encrypted with military-grade security. I dialed a number I had not used in years. Pierce, I said, when the voice on the other end answered. Mr. Montgomery. We thought you were retired. I was, I said, my voice cold and steady. But I have one last job. I need you to open a file on a man named Bradley Hamilton. I want to know everything. Every bank account. Every credit card. Every lie he has ever told. And Pierce, find out where he forged my signature. Because I am going to bury him. I hung up the phone and put on my mask of the frail, broken old man. I walked out to the backyard to find the shed that would be my home. As I walked through the overgrown grass, I looked back at the house. I saw Bradley in the window laughing. Laugh while you can, son, I thought. Because the landlord is home, and rent is due. The sound of a car horn blaring from the driveway shattered the tense silence of the afternoon. It was not a friendly honk. It was an impatient, demanding sound that expected the world to move out of its way. I watched through the grime-streaked window as a cherry-red Mercedes convertible pulled up. The woman behind the wheel looked like she was trying to hold on to her youth with both hands and a lot of plastic surgery. Her hair was dyed a harsh, unnatural shade of blonde, and she wore sunglasses big enough to cover half her face. This was Agnes Hamilton, Bradley's mother, the architect of my daughter's misery. Sarah scrambled toward the door, wiping her hands on that disgraceful apron. Her face was pale with a new kind of terror. Bradley was right behind her, fixing his collar, checking his reflection in the hallway mirror. He looked like a nervous servant preparing for the arrival of a queen. Open the door, Sarah, he hissed, and do not embarrass me. If she sees one speck of dust, I will make you lick it up. I leaned on my cane, making myself small against the wall, watching the performance begin. Agnes swept into the house in a cloud of overpowering perfume that smelled like roses and old money. She dropped her fur coat onto the floor without looking, knowing Sarah would catch it before it hit the dust. She did not say hello. She did not hug her son. She simply walked into the center of the room and wrinkled her nose. "It smells like failure in here," she announced. Her voice was shrill and grating. "Sarah, why are the curtains closed? It looks like a mausoleum." "And my God, look at you. You look like a drowned rat. Have you no pride?" Sarah hung her head, clutching the fur coat to her chest. "I am sorry, Agnes. I was just cleaning." Agnes scoffed. "You are always cleaning, but nothing is ever clean. It is your nature, I suppose. You Montgomerys always did have dirt under your fingernails." Then she saw me. She stopped dead in her tracks, lowering her sunglasses to peer at me with eyes that looked like 2 chips of ice. She looked me up and down, taking in my rumpled suit, my scuffed shoes, and the way I leaned heavily on the cane. "Who is this vagrant?" she asked, pointing a manicured finger at me. "Bradley." "Why is there a beggar in the living room?" Bradley stepped forward, a nervous laugh bubbling in his throat. "Mother, you remember Gus, Sarah's father. He returned from Dubai today." Agnes's eyes widened, not with recognition, but with malicious delight. A slow, cruel smile spread across her face, revealing teeth that were too white and too straight. "Gus," she said, dragging out my name. "Well, well, well. The great tycoon returns. I heard the rumors, you know. People say you lost everything, that you made bad deals, that you are penniless." I lowered my head, feigning humiliation. "It is true, Agnes," I rasped. "The market turned. I have nothing. I came to ask for shelter." She threw her head back and laughed, a harsh barking sound that grated on my nerves. "Shelter. You came to beg. How poetic. The man who thought he was better than everyone else is now sleeping on my son's charity. Well, Bradley, what are you going to do with him? We cannot have him stinking up the guest room." "He is staying in the shed," Mother Bradley said quickly, eager to please her. "He knows his place. He is going to earn his keep." Agnes nodded approvingly. "Good. Very good. A shed is fitting. Now I am starving. Sarah, stop standing there like a statue and serve dinner. And do not burn the roast this time, or you will not eat for a week." The next 2 hours were an exercise in torture that tested every ounce of my self-control. I sat on a wooden stool in the corner of the dining room. I was not allowed at the table. Bradley and Agnes sat at the head and foot of the long mahogany table that I had paid for 8 years ago. They used the good china, the silver cutlery, the crystal wine glasses. Sarah ran back and forth from the kitchen carrying heavy platters of food. The smell of rosemary and roasted beef filled the air, making my stomach rumble. I watched as Sarah placed a prime rib roast in the center of the table. It was cooked to perfection, the juices running onto the platter. She served mashed potatoes with truffle oil, glazed carrots, and fresh-baked rolls. Agnes did not say thank you. She simply picked up her fork and began to eat, complaining between bites. "The potatoes are cold, Sarah. The carrots are too soft. Do you have no skills at all? My son works all day to provide this beautiful home, and you cannot even cook a decent meal." Bradley nodded, his mouth full of meat. "I tell her mother, she is useless, but I have a big heart. I keep her around. They ate like gluttons. They poured glass after glass of expensive red wine. I recognized the label. It was a bottle from my private cellar, a vintage I had been saving for Sarah's first anniversary. Now these parasites were guzzling it down like cheap grape juice, staining their lips purple. Sarah stood by the kitchen door, her hands clasped in front of her apron, waiting for orders. She looked faint. I could see her eyeing the basket of bread rolls, her body swaying slightly from hunger. "May I have some water?" "Agnes," she whispered. Agnes slammed her fork down. "Water. You want water while we are eating? Can you not see we are having a conversation? You are so rude. Wait until we are finished. If there are scraps left over, you can eat then." I gripped my cane. I imagined smashing the crystal wine glass into Agnes's face. I imagined overturning the table and shoving that roast beef down Bradley's throat until he choked. But I did nothing. I sat on my stool and I watched. I needed them to feel safe. I needed them to feel invincible, because the higher they climbed, the harder they would fall. Agnes turned her attention to me, wiping grease from her chin. "So Gus," she said, swirling her wine, "tell me, how does it feel? To go from millions to nothing. To know that your entire life was a waste." "It is humbling, Agnes," I said quietly. "Humbling," she sneered. "It is pathetic. You know, I always told Bradley not to marry into your family. I told him you were new money, flashy, unstable. And look, I was right. My Bradley is the successful one now. He is the provider. He is the king of this castle." I looked at Bradley, the man who had never worked an honest day in his life, the man who had stolen my money, forged my signature, and enslaved my daughter. He puffed out his chest, preening under his mother's praise. "That is right, Mother," he said. "I made smart investments. I built this life. Lies. Layers and layers of lies. But Agnes believed them, or maybe she just did not care as long as the wine kept flowing and the bills got paid." When they were finally full, bloated and red-faced, Bradley waved his hand at the table. "Clear it away, Sarah, and bring the dessert." Sarah moved to clear the plates. Her hand shook as she reached for a half-eaten roll left on Bradley's plate. She was so hungry she could not help herself. Bradley's hand shot out and slapped hers away. "Ah, ah, ah!" he scolded like he was training a dog. "Not yet. You know the rules. Guests first, then the help." He grabbed the roll and crumbled it in his fist, dropping the pieces onto the floor. "Oops," he said, grinning at his mother. "Clumsy me." "Well, Sarah, you can have that. But pick it up now before the ants get it." I watched my daughter, the girl who had graduated with honors, the girl who had dreams of being an artist, fall to her knees. I watched her pick up the crumbs of bread from the floor and put them in her mouth. She did not look at me. She was too ashamed. That was the moment. That was the moment I decided that prison was too good for them. I was going to destroy them. I was going to take everything they had, everything they loved, everything they thought they owned, and I was going to burn it to the ground while they watched. "Get him out of here," Agnes said, suddenly pointing at me with her fork. "He is staring. It is creepy. He ruins my appetite." Bradley stood up, wiping his mouth. "You heard her, Gus. Party is over. Go to the shed." I stood up slowly, my joints cracking. "Thank you for the hospitality," I said, my voice dripping with a sarcasm they were too arrogant to hear. I walked to the kitchen door. Sarah was there, holding a tray of dirty dishes. Our eyes met for a second. I tried to send her a message with my gaze. "Hold on, just a little longer." She looked away, blinking back tears. I walked out the back door into the humid Texas night. The shed was exactly as Bradley had described. It was a small metal structure in the corner of the yard filled with rusted lawnmowers and bags of fertilizer. There was a cot in the corner with a thin, stained mattress and no blanket. The air smelled of gasoline and mold. I sat on the cot, listening to the crickets. Through the window of the main house, I could see the warm glow of the chandelier in the dining room. I could see Bradley and Agnes laughing, raising their glasses in a toast. They were celebrating their power. They were celebrating their cruelty. They thought I was a broken old man shivering in the dark. They thought they had won. I reached into the inner pocket of my jacket and pulled out my satellite phone. The screen glowed blue in the darkness, illuminating my face. I was not shivering. My hands were steady. My mind was as sharp as a razor blade. I dialed Pierce. "Report," I said when he answered. "Mr. Montgomery," Pierce said, his voice crisp and professional. "We have the financials. It is worse than we thought. Bradley Hamilton has never held a real job. He lists himself as a consultant for a shell company that has zero revenue. His credit cards are maxed out. He has 3 mortgages on the house, all obtained with forged signatures. But that is not the interesting part. Tell me, I said. He has a gambling problem, sir. A big one. He owes $500,000 to a syndicate in Las Vegas. They have been threatening him. That is why he is squeezing your daughter. He is terrified. I smiled in the dark. It was a cold, predatory smile. $500,000, I whispered. That is cheap, Sir Pierce asked. Buy the debt. Pierce, I said. Excuse me, sir. Contact the syndicate. Tell them a third party wants to purchase Bradley Hamilton's debt. Offer them 60 cents on the dollar. Cash. Tonight. I want to own him, Pierce. I want to own every cent he owes. I want to be the one holding the leash. I understand, Sir Pierce said. And the mother? Agnes Hamilton. Look into her too, I said. She likes her fur coats and her Mercedes. Find out who is paying for them. If Bradley is drowning, she must be leeching off someone else, or she is next in line for the fall. I will get on it immediately. One more thing, Pierce, I said, watching Bradley's silhouette in the window. Freeze the trust fund. The one Bradley thinks he has access to. The one he has been draining. Lock it down. When he goes to the ATM tomorrow, I want him to see a zero balance. I want him to feel the panic start to rise in his throat. Consider it done, Mr. Montgomery. I hung up the phone and lay back on the cot. The mattress was hard and the shed was cold, but I did not care. I had slept in worse places while building my fortune. I closed my eyes and listened to the laughter coming from the house. Laugh loud. Agnes, I thought. Eat your roast beef, Bradley. Enjoy your stolen wine, because this is the last good meal you are ever going to have. Tomorrow the bill comes due, and I am the one collecting. The morning sun did not bring warmth to the Hamilton household. It only illuminated the dust and the decay. I watched from the window of the garden shed as Bradley reversed the silver Porsche out of the driveway. It was a car I had purchased for Sarah's 30th birthday, a gift she was supposed to use to drive to art galleries and charity luncheons. Now her husband drove it like a teenager, revving the engine unnecessarily loud, a peacock screaming for attention before peeling out onto the street. He was heading to his imaginary job at the shell company that paid him nothing, leaving his wife and his mother behind. Agnes was still asleep upstairs, probably sleeping off the bottle of wine she had consumed the night before. The house was quiet for the first time in 24 hours. I waited until the sound of the Porsche faded into the distance before I stepped out of the shed. My joints ached from the hard cot and the damp night air, but my mind was sharp. I walked to the back door and entered the kitchen. I found Sarah in the laundry room. She was not using the high-end washing machine and dryer I had installed years ago. Instead, she was standing over a utility sink, scrubbing one of Bradley's dress shirts by hand. The water was scalding hot steam rising around her face. Her hands were submerged in the soapy water, red and raw. She looked up when I entered, fear flashing in her eyes, before she realized it was just me. Agnes says the machine wastes electricity, she whispered, returning to her scrubbing. She says I have to earn my keep, Dad. She says electricity is for people who contribute financially. I walked over and turned off the tap. The silence that followed was heavy. I took her wet, soapy hands in mine and pulled them out of the sink. They were trembling. The skin was cracked and bleeding around the knuckles. Sarah, I said, my voice low and steady. We need to talk. The witch is asleep. The monster is gone. Tell me about the debt. Tell me exactly what he told you. She tried to pull away, looking toward the ceiling, as if Agnes could hear us through the floorboards. Dad, please. If they catch us talking. They will not catch us, Sarah. Now tell me, why do you think I stole money? Why do you think I am a criminal? She slumped against the washing machine, deflated. She looked so small. "It started about 6 months after you left for Dubai," she said, her voice barely audible. The letters stopped coming. The emails bounced back. "I tried to call your office, but the number was disconnected. Bradley told me there was an investigation. He said the FBI had frozen your assets. He said you had been running a Ponzi scheme and that you had fled the country to avoid arrest." I felt a vein throb in my temple. I had never stopped writing. I had sent letters every week. I had sent emails. Bradley must have intercepted everything. He had built a wall of silence around her brick by brick. He showed me the papers, Dad. Bank transfers. He said you stole $5 million from his family's trust. He said his mother was going to lose her house because of you. He said he could go to the police, but he loved me too much to see my father die in prison. So he made a deal. He said if I worked, if I took care of them, he would keep the secret. He would pay back the debt slowly out of his own pocket. I closed my eyes, fighting back a wave of nausea. It was a masterclass in manipulation. He had painted himself as the savior and me as the villain. He had made her feel grateful for her own slavery. "Sarah," I said, opening my eyes, "I sent you money. I sent you $50,000 every single month for 8 years. I set up a separate account in your name. A secret account. Did you ever see it?" Her eyes went wide. 50,000. "Dad, what are you talking about? We have been broke for years. Bradley gives me $20 a week for groceries. I have to beg him for money to buy feminine products." The rage inside me turned cold and solid like concrete setting in a foundation. I knew then what I had to do. I needed to see the books. "Where is his office, Sarah?" She pointed to the study down the hall, the room that used to be my library. "It is locked, Dad. He keeps the key on a chain around his neck. He says it contains sensitive legal documents about your case." I did not need a key. I was a builder. I knew how doors worked, and I knew how to bypass them. I told Sarah to keep watch at the bottom of the stairs. If Agnes woke up, she was to drop a pan in the kitchen. I walked to the study door. It was a solid oak door, one I had chosen myself for its soundproofing qualities. I knelt down and examined the lock. It was a simple deadbolt, nothing sophisticated. Bradley was arrogant. He thought fear was a better lock than steel. I pulled a thin piece of wire from my pocket, a tool I had fashioned in the shed from a rusted garden tie. It took me less than 10 seconds to pick the lock. The mechanism clicked, and the door swung open. The room smelled of stale cigar smoke and cheap cologne. My antique desk was covered in papers. Empty brandy snifters littered the bookshelves. I sat in my old leather chair, the leather cracking from neglect, and started digging. I did not have to look far. Bradley was not just arrogant, he was careless. In the bottom drawer beneath a stack of adult magazines, I found a thick leather binder. I opened it, and there it was. The story of my daughter's life in numbers. I found the statements for the secret account I had set up for Sarah. The balance should have been nearly $5 million plus interest. It was zero. I flipped through the pages, my hands shaking with fury. I saw the withdrawals. $50,000 every month, like clockwork. And at the bottom of every withdrawal slip was a signature. Sarah Montgomery. It was a forgery. A bad one. It looked nothing like her elegant script. It was jagged and rushed. But the bank had accepted it because Bradley had likely charmed or bribed a teller. Or maybe he had just done it online using her credentials that he had stolen. I kept turning the pages. I found where the money went. It did not go to pay off a debt. It went to casinos in Las Vegas. It went to online betting sites. It went to luxury car dealerships. It went to jewelry stores. And then I found something that made me stop breathing for a moment. It was a receipt from a private investigation firm dated 5 years ago. The subject line read, "Augustus Montgomery status." Bradley knew. He knew I was not broke. He knew I was building skyscrapers in Dubai. The report detailed my success, my new company, my assets. He knew I was a billionaire, and he had kept it from Sarah. He had intercepted my letters, my gifts, my attempts to reach her. He had convinced her I was a fugitive while he spent my money on hookers and blackjack. I looked at the date on the report. 5 years ago. That was around the time Sarah stopped writing to me. That was when he had convinced her I had abandoned her. I felt a tear roll down my cheek. Not for me, but for her. I had been sending money into a black hole thinking I was supporting her, thinking I was giving her a good life. Instead, I had been funding her torture. Every dollar I sent was another bottle of wine for Agnes, another betting slip for Bradley, another reason for them to keep her trapped here. I was not just her father. I was the financier of her misery. I slammed the binder shut and stood up. I needed air. I needed to think. But first, I needed to secure the evidence. I took out my phone and photographed every page, every statement, every forged signature. I photographed the private investigator's report. I photographed the betting slips. I put everything back exactly as I found it. I locked the door behind me. I went back to the kitchen. Sarah was standing by the stove, trembling, her eyes fixed on the ceiling, listening for Agnes. When she saw me, she let out a breath she seemed to have been holding for minutes. "Did you find anything?" she whispered. I walked over to her and placed my hands on her shoulders. I looked into her eyes and I lied. Not because I wanted to deceive her, but because she was not ready for the truth yet. If she knew how much money he had stolen, she might scream. She might attack him, and that would ruin everything. "I found enough, Sarah," I said. "I found proof that the debt is a lie. You do not owe him a dime. He owes you." She slumped against me, burying her face in my chest. "Oh God, Dad," I thought. "I really thought I was saving you." "You are saving me, sweetheart," I said, kissing the top of her head. "You are the bravest person I know, but now it is my turn to save you." I pulled away gently. "I need to make a call, Sarah. Go back to your work. Act normal. Whatever happens tonight, whatever he says, do not react. Let me handle him." She nodded, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. "Okay, Dad." I walked out to the shed, my heart heavy with the weight of what I had learned. I sat on the cot and dialed Pierce again. "I have the proof, Pierce," I said, my voice devoid of emotion. "He forged her signature. He drained the trust. $4.8 million. Gone." "I can have the police there in an hour," Sir Pierce said. "We can have him in cuffs before dinner." "No," I said. "That is too fast. Prison is too good for him. He needs to feel what she felt. He needs to know what it is like to be helpless, to be trapped, to have the walls close in on you." "What are your instructions, sir?" "You bought the gambling debt?" I asked. "Yes, sir. We own the paper. $500,000. The syndicate was happy to unload it." "Good. Now I want you to squeeze him. Call him. Do not tell him who you are. Just tell him the debt has been sold, and the new owner is not as patient as the last one. Tell him he has 24 hours to come up with the full amount, or he loses a finger." "Sir, are you sure?" "Do it, Pierce. Make him sweat. Make him terrified." And Pierce cut off his access. "Which access, sir?" "Everything. The credit cards, the bank accounts, the ones he stole from Sarah. Flag them for fraud. Freeze them. When he tries to buy his way out of this, I want him to reach into his pocket and find nothing but lint. I want him to realize that the golden goose is dead." "Understood. Anything else?" "Yes. Find out who the private investigator was, the one who wrote the report on me. I want to know how much Bradley paid him to keep my location a secret, and then I want you to hire him. Double his rate. I want him working for us now." I hung up the phone. I sat in the darkness of the shed watching the house. I saw Agnes's bedroom light turn on. The Queen was awake. The day of servitude was beginning for Sarah, but not for long. I looked at my hands. They were calloused from years of laying bricks and pouring concrete. They were hands that built things, but today they were hands that were going to dismantle a man piece by piece. I remembered the way Bradley looked at me when I arrived. The arrogance, the disdain. He thought he was the king of the castle because he had stolen the crown. He did not know that the castle was built on sand, and I was the storm that was coming to wash it all away. I lay back on the cot and waited. I waited for the phone call that would shatter Bradley's world. I waited for the panic to set in. I waited for the moment when the predator became the prey. Tonight at dinner, I would not just be the silent observer. Tonight, I would start pulling the strings, and Bradley Hamilton would dance until his legs broke. The sun had barely set when Bradley came crashing through the front door, looking like a man who had just seen his own grave dug. He was sweating profusely, despite the air conditioning, his expensive Italian suit stained with dark patches under the arms. He slammed the door and leaned against it, chest-heaving eyes darting around the foyer like a trapped animal. I sat in my corner on a wooden stool, polishing my cane, watching him unravel. It was a beautiful sight. Earlier that afternoon, Pierce had confirmed the transaction. We now owned Bradley's debt. The syndicate in Las Vegas was happy to offload a high-risk borrower for 60 cents on the dollar. They did not care who paid as long as they got their cash. Now I was the shark circling in the water, and Bradley was bleeding heavily. His phone rang, a shrill, demanding tone that made him jump nearly out of his skin. He looked at the screen, and his face went the color of ash. He rejected the call, but it rang again immediately. "Answer it, Bradley," I thought. "It is your new creditors calling." He finally answered, pressing the phone to his ear with a trembling hand. "Hello," he stammered. "Look, I told you I need more time. My investments are tied up. I just need a few days." He stopped listening to whatever was being said on the other end. His eyes went wide with terror. No, please do not come here. My mother is here. My wife. We can work this out. Please just give me 24 hours. He hung up and dropped the phone as if it were burning his skin. He ran his hands through his thinning hair, pacing back and forth. Sarah came out of the kitchen, wiping her hands on a rag. She saw his state and froze. "Bradley." "What is wrong?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Shut up!" he screamed, spinning on her. "Just shut up, you useless cow. This is your fault. If your father had not stolen my money, I would not be in this mess." I stood up slowly, leaning on my cane. "Is there a problem, son?" I asked, my voice raspy and weak. He glared at me, his eyes full of hate. You are the problem. You and your thief of a daughter. I need cash. I need $500,000 by midnight, or they are going to kill me." Before he could say another word, a heavy pounding shook the front door. It was not a knock. It was a battering ram. The wood groaned under the force. Bradley let out a high-pitched squeak of terror and scrambled backward, hiding behind Sarah. "Do not open it," he hissed. "Do not open it." The pounding came again, followed by a deep voice that resonated through the house. "Hamilton, open up. We know you are in there." I hobbled toward the door. Bradley tried to grab me, but he was too busy cowering. I unlocked the deadbolt and swung the door open. 2 men stood on the porch. They were massive, built like mountains of muscle in cheap leather jackets. They were professionals employed by my security firm, but to Bradley they looked like death incarnate. "We are looking for Bradley Hamilton, the one on the left," said his voice flat and devoid of emotion. I stepped aside, revealing the pathetic figure of my son-in-law cowering behind my daughter. "There he is," I said. The men stepped inside, bringing the smell of ozone and violence with them. They did not look at Sarah or me. Their eyes were locked on Bradley. "Mr. Hamilton," the second man said, cracking his knuckles. Your grace period has expired. Our employer is very unhappy with your lack of payment. Bradley tried to speak, but only a squeak came out. He cleared his throat. I can pay. I promise. I just need access to my accounts. My father-in-law here, he ruined my liquidity. The first man stepped forward, invading Bradley's personal space. He reached out and grabbed Bradley by the lapels of his jacket, lifting him onto his toes. We do not care about your liquidity, the man growled. We care about the principle. You owe $500,000. You have 1 hour to come up with a good faith payment. $100,000. Cash or transfer. And if I do not, Bradley whispered, tears streaming down his face. The man smiled. It was a terrifying smile. Then we start taking pieces, he said. A finger for every 10 grand. We will start with the thumbs so you can never hold a deck of cards again. He dropped Bradley, who collapsed onto the floor, sobbing. 1 hour, the man said. We will be waiting in the car. They turned and walked out, closing the door softly behind them. The silence they left behind was heavy with panic. Bradley crawled across the floor towards Sarah, grabbing her ankles. Sarah, you have to help me. Where is the jewelry? Where is the silver? We need to sell it. He is gone, Bradley, she cried, pulling away from him. You sold it all years ago. There is nothing left. He stood up, his eyes wild. Then call the bank. Use your father's name. Forge a check. Do something. I cannot, she sobbed. The accounts are empty, Bradley. You drained them. He raised his hand to strike her, screaming in frustration. I gripped my cane, ready to intervene, but then I remembered the plan. I had to play the part. I had to deliver the bait. Wait, I croaked, stepping into the light. Bradley froze his hand in midair. He looked at me, his breathing jagged. What do you want, old man? I reached into the inner pocket of my tattered jacket. My hand shook, feigning the weakness of age. I pulled out a sleek black wallet. It was old leather, worn smooth by decades of use. I opened it and extracted a single card. It was heavy, made of anodized titanium, a black card, the kind only offered to the ultra-wealthy. It caught the light of the chandelier, glinting with a dark promise. I did not lose everything, I lied, my voice trembling with fake emotion. I saved a little. My pension. It was supposed to be for my retirement. For a nursing home. Bradley stared at the card. His greed was a palpable force overriding his fear. He took a step toward me. How much is on it? He asked, his voice hoarse. About 100,000, I said. It is all I have left in the world. I was saving it to die with dignity. I looked at Sarah. She was shaking her head, her eyes begging me not to do it. Dad, no, she whispered. Do not give it to him. I ignored her. I looked at Bradley. If I give you this, will you leave my daughter alone? Will you promise not to hurt her tonight? Bradley snatched the card from my hand so fast he almost scratched me. He held it up to the light, examining it like a starving man looking at a piece of steak. He did not see a father's sacrifice. He did not see love. He saw a lifeline for his own pathetic skin. The pin, I asked. 1952, I said. My birth year. He laughed. A manic, hysterical sound. You hold out on me, old man. You let me sweat while you had this in your pocket. You are lucky I do not beat you for that. He did not say thank you. He did not promise to pay me back. He turned and ran for the door, grabbing his car keys from the table. I will be back, he shouted over his shoulder. Do not go anywhere. He slammed the door, and a moment later I heard the Porsche roar to life and screech down the driveway. Sarah collapsed onto the sofa, burying her face in her hands. Dad, how could you? That was your money. You need that. He is just going to gamble it away or give it to those men. I sat down next to her and put my arm around her. She leaned into me, sobbing. "It is okay." "Sarah," I said, my voice calm and strong, no longer the voice of the frail old man. "It is going to be okay." She looked up, confused by the change in my tone. "Dad, he is not going to get any money, Sarah." "But the card." I smiled. "That card is linked to an account that has been flagged for international fraud. The moment he puts it into an ATM, the moment he tries to run a transaction, it is going to trigger a silent alarm. The machine will swallow the card. The account will lock down. And every other account linked to his name, the ones he stole from you, the ones he used to hide my money, will freeze instantly." Sarah stared at me, her mouth slightly open. "You did that on purpose." I nodded. "I cut the line, Sarah. He is drifting now. He has no money, he has no credit, and he has two very angry men waiting outside who think he is coming back with cash." I stood up and walked to the window. I could see the taillights of the Porsche disappearing down the street. I imagined him gripping the steering wheel, his heart pounding with relief, thinking he had won again, thinking he had outsmarted the old man. I pictured him pulling up to the bank. I pictured him running to the ATM machine, his hands shaking as he inserted the black titanium card. I pictured the anticipation as he punched in the code 1952. And then the pause, the screen processing, the mechanical whirring sound, and then the message: "Transaction denied. Card retained. Please contact your financial institution." I could almost hear his scream from here. I could feel the cold wash of terror that would flood his veins when he realized the machine was not giving the card back. When he realized he was standing there empty-handed, with 5 minutes left on his deadline. I turned back to Sarah. "He is going to come back," I said. "And he is going to be angry. He is going to be more dangerous than he has ever been because a trapped rat fights the hardest." Sarah stood up, wiping her tears. She looked different. The hopelessness was gone, replaced by a steely resolve I had not seen in years. "What do we do, Dad?" "We wait," I said. "We let him come. We let him see that his house of cards has fallen. And then we introduce him to reality." I walked over to the kitchen counter where Bradley had left his half-finished beer. I picked it up and poured it down the sink. "Get ready, Sarah," I said. "The show is about to start." Outside, the wind began to pick up, rattling the window panes. A storm was coming. But the real storm was driving a silver Porsche back toward this house, realizing that for the first time in his life, his charm and his lies could not save him. He was broke. He was exposed. And he was coming home to a war he did not know he had already lost. The silence that woke me the next morning was heavy and suffocating. It was not the peaceful silence of a country dawn, but the ominous stillness of a machine that had suddenly stopped working. The constant hum of the central air conditioning, which fought a daily battle against the blistering Texas heat, was gone. The refrigerator compressor was quiet. The digital clocks on the microwave and the oven were blank, dark screens staring back at the empty kitchen. I lay on my cot in the shed, smiling at the ceiling. Pierce was efficient. He had not just frozen the accounts, he had severed the lifelines. The utilities were in the name of the trust, a trust I controlled, and last night I had issued the order to terminate service immediately due to non-payment. I waited. I knew the scream was coming. It was inevitable, like thunder following lightning. "Sarah, where is my coffee?" It was a shriek that could shatter glass. Agnes Hamilton was awake and her world was already crumbling. I took my time getting dressed, buttoning my tattered shirt with deliberate slowness. I grabbed my cane and walked to the back door. Inside, the kitchen was sweltering. Without the AC, the house had turned into a greenhouse, trapping the humidity and the heat. Sarah was standing by the counter, looking pale and frightened, holding an empty coffee pot. Agnes stood in the doorway of the kitchen, wrapped in a silk kimono that had seen better days. Her hair was in curlers, and without her makeup she looked like a gargoyle that had been left out in the rain. Her face was flushed a blotchy red, not from the heat, but from pure, unadulterated rage. "Why is the coffee maker not working?" she screeched, slamming her hand on the counter. "Why are the lights off? It is 1,000 degrees in here." "Sarah, what did you do? Did you break the breaker box? You are so incompetent, I cannot believe my son married such a useless creature." Sarah flinched. "Agnes, I think the power is out." "Obviously the power is out, you idiot," Agnes spat. "Go fix it. Call the power company. Tell them who we are. Tell them I demand they turn it back on this instant." I stepped into the room, tapping my cane on the floor to announce my presence. I shuffled forward, hunching my shoulders, playing the part of the confused old man. "Good morning, Agnes," I said, my voice trembling slightly. "Is there a problem?" My fan stopped working in the shed. I thought maybe I had kicked the cord. She whirled on me, her eyes bulging. "Nobody cares about your fan, old man. My entire house is dead. My food is going to spoil. My wine fridge is off. Do you know how much that wine costs? It needs to be kept at 55 degrees. She turned back to Sarah, grabbing her by the arm. "Call them," she hissed. "Use your cell phone. The landline is dead too." Sarah pulled her phone from her pocket. Her hands were shaking so hard she dropped it. It clattered on the floor. "It is dead, Agnes," she whispered, tears filling her eyes. "I tried to charge it last night, but the outlets were not working." Agnes let out a growl of frustration. She reached for the tap to splash water on her face, likely trying to cool down her temper. She twisted the handle. Nothing happened. Not a drop. The pipes groaned, a hollow, mournful sound echoing through the walls. Then a single sputter of brown sludge coughed out of the faucet and splattered onto her silk sleeve. She stared at the mud on her expensive robe, her mouth opening and closing like a fish on a hook. "No water," she whispered, the reality finally piercing her bubble of arrogance. "No water. How am I supposed to bathe? How am I supposed to flush the toilet?" I leaned against the counter, picking up an apple from the fruit bowl. I took a loud, crunchy bite. "You know," I said, chewing slowly, "I saw a truck outside this morning, before the sun came up. Big yellow truck. It had a logo on the side. Water and Power, I think. Or maybe it was the county sheriff. My eyes aren't what they used to be." Agnes froze. "What? What did you see?" I shrugged. "A man with a big wrench. He was doing something to the meter on the side of the house. He put a red tag on it. Usually that means the bill hasn't been paid in a long time. But that can't be right. Bradley is a rich man. He would never forget to pay the bills." I watched the doubt creep into her eyes. It was a beautiful thing. For years she had believed her son was a golden god, a financial genius who could do no wrong. Now the cracks were starting to show. "Bradley," she muttered. "Where is Bradley?" "He is not back yet," Sarah said softly. "He never came home last night." Agnes's face twisted. She looked from Sarah to me and then back to the dry faucet. The heat in the kitchen was rising, becoming oppressive. Sweat beaded on her upper lip, ruining her composure. "He is working," she snapped, defensive, but her voice wavered. "He is closing a big deal. He probably stayed at the office. He will fix this. He always fixes everything." Just then, the front door slammed open. Heavy footsteps echoed in the hallway. Bradley stumbled into the kitchen. He looked like a man who had been chewed up and spit out by the city. His suit was rumpled, his tie missing. His eyes were wild, bloodshot, and terrified. He had clearly spent the night hiding in his car, or wandering the streets, afraid to come home empty-handed to the thugs, but having nowhere else to go. Bradley, Agnes screamed, rushing toward him. "Thank God. You have to call the power company immediately. And the water department. They cut us off. Can you believe the audacity? Some idiot made a clerical error. Fix it." I need a shower. I feel disgusting. Bradley stared at her blankly. He blinked slowly as if he didn't understand the language she was speaking. Cut us off, he mumbled. Yes, cut us off, Agnes yelled, grabbing his lapels and shaking him. Look at me. Look at this house. It is a sauna. Fix it, Bradley. Pay them whatever they want. Sue them for emotional distress. Just get my air conditioning back on. Bradley pushed her away. It was not a gentle push. It was a rough shove born of exhaustion and panic. Agnes stumbled back, hitting her hip against the island. She gasped, shocked by his physical aggression. Shut up, Mother, Bradley croaked, his voice hoarse. Just shut up about the air conditioning. Agnes straightened up, her eyes narrowing into slits. Excuse me, did you just tell me to shut up? After everything I have done for you. I am your mother. I raised you. I demand respect. Respect, Bradley laughed. A dry, humorless sound. Respect does not pay the bills, Mother. And guess what? Neither do I. What are you talking about? She asked, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. I tried to get money, Bradley said, pacing the kitchen, running his hands through his hair. I went to the ATM. I tried the credit cards, all of them, even the secret ones. They are gone. Frozen. Declined. He looked at Sarah, who was shrinking into the corner. The bank says there is a fraud investigation, he shouted, pointing an accusing finger at her. They locked me out. They locked everything out. I have $0. I have -$. And there are men outside who want to cut off my fingers. Agnes stared at him. The realization hit her like a physical blow. It was not concern for her son that I saw in her eyes. It was concern for herself. You are broke, she whispered. You lied to me. You said you were a partner. You said we were set for life. I was trying, Bradley yelled. I was juggling. I was making it work. But someone cut the strings. He turned his wild eyes on me. I was still leaning against the counter, eating my apple, calm as a statue. It is you, isn't it? He hissed, stepping toward me. You gave me that card. You set me up. That black card. The machine swallowed it. It triggered the freeze. I took another bite of the apple. I don't know what you mean, son, I said, my voice innocent. I gave you my life savings, my pension. If the machine took it, maybe you typed the pin wrong. Old eyes, you know. Sometimes numbers get fuzzy. You liar, he screamed, lunging for me, but he didn't reach me. Agnes grabbed his arm. She spun him around, her fingernails digging into his bicep. You lost my money, she shrieked. My retirement fund. The money from the sale of my house. You said you invested it. You said it was safe. Bradley tried to shake her off. I did invest it. In the market. It is temporarily inaccessible. Inaccessible, Agnes yelled. You gambled it. I know you, Bradley. I know your sickness. You gambled my future away, you selfish little parasite. She slapped him. It was a hard, crisp sound that echoed in the silent kitchen. Bradley stumbled back, holding his cheek. He looked at his mother with pure hatred. Don't you dare hit me, he growled. You are the one who wanted the fur coats. You are the one who needed the Mercedes. You bled me dry, Mother. You and your endless need to look rich. I did this for you. I stole for you. You stole, Agnes gasped, clutching her chest. You are a criminal. Oh my God, I am ruined. I am going to be homeless. She turned to Sarah, her eyes manic. Do something, she screamed. You are the wife. Fix this. Get a job. Sell your jewelry. Sell your kidney. I don't care. Get the power back on. Sarah stepped forward, her voice trembling but clear. I don't have any jewelry, Agnes. You sold it all last year. Remember, for your cruise. Agnes let out a screech of inarticulate rage. She looked around the room, hunting for a target, someone to blame, someone to hurt. Her eyes landed on the crystal vase on the counter. She grabbed it and threw it at the wall. It shattered, sending shards of glass flying across the kitchen. "I hate this house," she screamed. "I hate this heat. I hate all of you." She stormed out of the kitchen, heading for the living room, probably to find a bottle of warm wine to drown her sorrows. Bradley stood in the middle of the kitchen, panting, his chest heaving. He looked at me, then at Sarah. He looked defeated, but I knew better. A man like Bradley didn't give up. He just got more desperate. He walked over to the sink and turned the handle, hoping for a miracle. The pipes groaned again, mocking him. He slammed his fist against the counter. "This isn't over," he muttered to no one in particular. "I can fix this. I just need to sell something. I need to liquidate." He looked up, his eyes locking onto the ceiling. "The house," he whispered. "The equity. It is worth millions. I can sell it fast. Cash deal." He turned to Sarah, a manic grin spreading across his face. "Where is the deed, Sarah? Where are the papers?" "I don't know," she said, backing away. "You have them, in your office." "No," he said, shaking his head. "I moved them, or you moved them. Find them. We are selling the house. Today, we take the money and we run. We go to Mexico. We disappear." He ran out of the kitchen toward the stairs, his footsteps heavy and frantic. I finished my apple and tossed the core into the trash can. I wiped my hands on a napkin. Sarah looked at me, her eyes wide with panic. "Dad, he is going to sell the house. We will be on the street." I walked over to her and smoothed her hair. "He can't sell what he doesn't own, sweetheart." "But the deed," she said. "It has his name on it." I smiled, a cold, hard smile. "Sarah, do you really think I would buy a $2 million house and put it in the name of a man I barely knew?" She stared at me, confused. "The deed in his office is a photocopy, Sarah. A prop. The real deed is in a safety deposit box in Zurich. The house belongs to a trust, and the only trustee is standing right in front of you. Let him look," I said, my voice dropping to a whisper. "Let him tear the house apart. Let him call the real estate agents. Let him think he has a way out. Because when he tries to sign that paper, when he tries to close that deal, he is going to walk right into the final trap." I turned toward the door of the shed. "It is getting hot in here," I said. "I am going to go lie down. The shade in the garden is cooler than this hellhole." I left Sarah standing in the silent, sweltering kitchen, surrounded by the wreckage of her husband's ego. Upstairs, I could hear Bradley throwing things, overturning drawers, frantically searching for a piece of paper that would save his life. He didn't know it yet, but he wasn't searching for his salvation. He was searching for his own arrest warrant, and I was going to be there to hand him the pen. The afternoon sun beat down on the roof of the mansion, turning the interior into a suffocating oven. The air was thick and stagnant, heavy with the smell of desperation and expensive cologne turning sour on sweating skin. I sat on a rusted lawn chair in the shade of the back porch, whittling a piece of driftwood with my pocket knife, waiting for the inevitable explosion. It did not take long. Through the open French doors, I heard Bradley pacing the living room floor. His footsteps were frantic, erratic, pounding against the hardwood, like the heartbeat of a man running for his life. He was on the phone, his voice rising in pitch with every sentence. "I do not care about the market value," he shouted into the receiver. "I am telling you, it is a turnkey property. 2 million, cash, no inspections, no escrow. I need the money wire transferred by tomorrow morning." He paused, listening to the person on the other end. I imagined it was some bottom-feeding real estate shark, the kind who preyed on distressed assets and desperate men. "Yes, I have the title," Bradley snapped. "It is clean. It is in my name. I am the sole owner. Just bring the contract. Bring the buyer. We will sign everything tonight." He hung up the phone and let out a scream of frustration that sounded more like a wounded animal than a human being. He needed that money. The men who had visited last night were not the kind to grant extensions. They would be back, and they would bring knives. I stood up and brushed the wood shavings from my trousers. It was time to bait the hook. I walked into the living room, leaning heavily on my cane, dragging my left leg just enough to look pathetic. Bradley was standing in the middle of the room, his shirt unbuttoned to his navel, his chest heaving. He looked at me with wild, bloodshot eyes. "What do you want, old man?" he spat. "Get back outside. You smell like fertilizer." I ignored the insult. I looked around the room with a confused expression. I heard yelling. I mumbled. "Is everything all right, son?" "Everything is fine," he lied, his voice cracking. "I am just closing a deal. A big deal. We are going to be rich again, Gus. Richer than you ever were." "That is good," I said, nodding slowly. "Does that mean you found the papers?" Bradley froze. "What papers?" "The ones in the safe," I said, pointing a shaking finger toward the study. "The big, heavy ones, with the gold seals. I saw you looking for them earlier." Bradley's eyes widened. He realized he had not actually checked the safe yet. He had assumed the deed was there because that is where he told himself he put it. But panic makes memory a slippery thing. He pushed past me, running toward the study. I followed him, keeping my pace slow and steady. I watched from the doorway as he tore the painting of a hunt scene off the wall, revealing the wall safe behind it. His hands were shaking so badly he could barely dial the combination. Right, left, right, click. He yanked the handle, and the heavy steel door swung open. He reached inside his fingers, clawing at the empty metal shelf. There was nothing there. No stacks of cash, no jewelry, and most importantly, no deed to the house. There was only a single piece of folded yellow notebook paper sitting in the center of the safe. Bradley grabbed it, unfolding it with frantic movements. He read it, and his face turned a color I had never seen on a living human before. A sickly, grayish green. He roared, a sound of pure primal rage. He crumpled the note and threw it across the room. "Where is it?" he screamed, spinning around to face me. "Where is the deed? You took it, you senile old thief." I took a step back, feigning fear. "I do not know what you are talking about, Bradley. I did not take anything." He lunged at me, grabbing the lapels of my jacket. He shook me so hard my teeth rattled. "Do not lie to me," he hissed, spittle flying onto my face. "The note. It says, 'looking for something.' That is your handwriting, Gus. I know it is. Where did you hide it?" I looked him in the eye, letting a flicker of confusion cross my face. "The note," I asked. "Oh, you mean the paper I left for Sarah? I was looking for a stamp earlier. I thought maybe there were stamps in the safe. But it was open, Bradley. It was already empty." "Liar," he shrieked, shoving me backward. I stumbled and fell against the doorframe, sliding down to the floor. "Sarah," he bellowed, running out into the hallway. "Sarah, get down here." Sarah appeared at the top of the stairs, looking pale and terrified. She was holding a basket of laundry. "What is it, Bradley?" she asked, her voice trembling. He ran up the stairs, two at a time, and grabbed her by the wrist, dragging her down. The laundry basket tumbled down the steps, spilling clothes everywhere. "Where is the deed?" he shouted, shaking her arm. "Did you take it? Did you give it to him?" "I swear I didn't," Sarah cried, wincing in pain. "I don't have the combination, Bradley. Only you have it." He threw her against the wall. "You are lying. Both of you are lying. I need that house. I need to sell it. If I don't get that money, they are going to kill me." He was unraveling completely. The arrogance was gone, replaced by the raw terror of a man who knows his time is up. He began tearing the study apart. He pulled books off the shelves, ripping the pages out. He overturned the desk. He smashed the lamps. He was looking for a piece of paper that would save his life, not knowing that the paper never existed in the form he imagined. I watched him destroy the room, waiting for the right moment. The moment when hope was completely gone. When he was broken enough to believe anything. I slowly reached into the inside pocket of my jacket. I pulled out a thick envelope sealed with a red wax stamp. It looked official. It looked important. It looked like salvation. "Is this what you are looking for, son?" I asked, my voice quiet amidst the chaos. Bradley stopped. He was panting, holding a shattered vase in his hand, ready to throw it. He turned his head slowly, his eyes locking onto the envelope in my hand. He dropped the vase. It crashed to the floor, joining the rest of the debris. "Give me that," he whispered. He scrambled over the broken furniture, crawling on his hands and knees until he was at my feet. He snatched the envelope from my hand, tearing it open. He pulled out the document. It was a deed. It was printed on heavy bond paper with an official-looking seal and a signature at the bottom. It described the property perfectly: the lot number, the square footage, and right there on the owner line was his name: Bradley Hamilton. He stared at it, tears of relief streaming down his dirty face. He kissed the paper. He actually kissed it. "I found it," he sobbed, laughing hysterically. "I found it. It was here all along." He looked up at me, his eyes wide and manic. "Where did you get this, Gus? Where was it?" I cleared my throat, adjusting my collar. "I found it in the recycling bin yesterday." I lied smoothly. "I thought it was junk mail. It looked fancy, so I kept it to use as scrap paper for my sketches. I did not know it was important." Bradley laughed again, a jagged, broken sound. "Junk mail. You old fool. You almost cost me my life over junk mail." He stood up, clutching the document to his chest like a holy relic. He did not question why the deed was in the recycling. He did not question why the seal looked so fresh. He wanted it to be real so desperately that he suspended all disbelief. That is the thing about con men. They are the easiest marks because they believe they are smarter than everyone else. He turned to Sarah, his demeanor changing instantly. The fear was gone, replaced by a surge of adrenaline and cruelty. "Get up," he barked at her. "Stop crying. We are back in business." He pulled out his phone and dialed a number. "Varga," he said, his voice regaining some of its old swagger. "I have the papers. Yes, the original deed. It is right here in my hand. Bring the buyer. Tonight. Yes, I want to do the closing here at the house. We will have a party, a celebration. Bring the cash, Varga. 2 million. And bring champagne." He hung up and spun around, surveying the wrecked room. "Clean this up," he ordered Sarah. "All of it. I want this house looking like a palace by 7 o'clock. We are having guests, important guests, investors. If this house does not shine, I will trade you to them as part of the deal." Sarah nodded, scrambling to pick up the books. "And you," Bradley said, pointing at me, "get back to the shed. Stay out of sight. If my investors see a homeless man wandering around, it will kill the property value." I stood up, leaning heavily on my cane. "Whatever you say, Bradley," I said. "I am just glad you found your paper." I turned and shuffled toward the back door. But as I passed him, I paused. "You know, son," I said, looking at the deed in his hand, "that is a very nice piece of paper. It looks valuable. Make sure you read the fine print before you sign it away." Bradley sneered. "I wrote the fine print, old man. Now get out." I walked out into the heat of the afternoon. I went back to the shed and sat on my cot. I pulled out my phone and texted Pierce. He took the bait. "The party is tonight. Bring the cavalry." I looked at the photo I had taken of the fake deed before I gave it to him. It was a masterpiece of forgery created by my own team. It looked identical to a real property deed, except for one tiny detail. A detail Bradley would never notice in his haste. A detail hidden in the legal jargon on the back page. The document he held was not a deed of ownership. It was a confession of guilt. The clause on page 4 stated that the signatory acknowledged full responsibility for all fraudulent transfers, embezzlement of funds, and elder abuse committed against the Montgomery estate. By signing it and handing it to a notary, he would be signing his own confession. I watched through the shed window as Bradley ran around the house shouting orders at Sarah. He was frantic manic, fueled by the delusion that he had escaped the trap. He thought he was hours away from freedom. He thought he was hours away from $2 million that would pay off his debts and leave him with a nice profit to start over. He did not know that the buyer Varga was not a real estate investor. Varga was an undercover federal agent Pierce had coordinated with. The cash in the briefcase would be marked bills, and the closing ceremony would be the final act of his tragedy. I saw Sarah running past the window carrying bags of trash. She looked exhausted, her face gaunt. But she kept going. She was holding on to the promise I had made her. Tonight, I thought. Tonight, it ends. I lay back on the cot and closed my eyes. I needed to rest. I needed to be ready. Because when the party started, I was going to make an entrance that none of them would ever forget. I was going to walk into that room, not as Gus, the broken old man, but as Augustus Montgomery, the tycoon. And I was going to bring the hammer down. The sun dipped below the horizon, but the Hamilton residence did not go dark. Instead, it lit up like a carnival ride in the middle of a blackout. Bradley had rented industrial generators. Their diesel engines roared in the backyard, belching black smoke into the night air, powering floodlights that bathed the house in an artificial blinding glare. He wanted the property to shine. He wanted the investors to see a palace, not a prison. I watched from the shadows of the garden shed as the catering vans arrived. Bradley had paid them in cash, likely using the last of the pawned jewelry money, or perhaps a payday loan he had secured with the fake deed. Waiters in crisp white uniforms scurried back and forth carrying trays of canapés and crates of champagne. It was a grotesque display of wealth, a masquerade ball held on the deck of the Titanic moments before it sank. Inside the house was a frenzy of activity. Through the open French doors, I could see Bradley running from room to room, adjusting pillows, straightening paintings, manic and sweating. He was wearing a tuxedo that was slightly too tight around the waist, a relic from his wedding day. He looked like a desperate magician trying to pull a rabbit out of a hat, except the rabbit was dead and the hat was on fire. Sarah was in the kitchen. I could not see her, but I knew she was there. Bradley had given her explicit instructions. She was not to be a wife tonight. She was not to be a hostess. She was to be a prop. At 7:30, the cars began to arrive. They were not the usual luxury sedans of the neighborhood. These were heavy black SUVs with tinted windows, the kind of cars that carry men who do not make appointments. Varga stepped out of the lead vehicle. He was a man of few words, dressed in a suit that cost more than Bradley's car. He looked at the house with cold, calculating eyes. He was playing his part perfectly. To Bradley, he looked like a savior with a briefcase full of cash. To me, he looked like the executioner. Bradley rushed out to meet them, his smile stretching so wide it looked painful. "Mr. Varga," he shouted, extending a sweaty hand. "Welcome to my humble abode. Please come in. The champagne is on ice. The papers are ready." Varga ignored the hand. He walked past Bradley into the foyer, his entourage flanking him, like a wall of muscle. "Let us see the merchandise," Varga rumbled. I adjusted my tie in the reflection of the shed window. I had found an old suit in the back of my closet, one I had left behind 8 years ago. It was dusty and smelled of mothballs, but it was a suit tailored on Savile Row. It fit me like armor. I grabbed my cane, not to lean on but to wield. It was time to join the party. I slipped through the back door into the kitchen. The heat from the ovens was stifling. The catering staff ignored me, too busy plating hors d'oeuvres to notice an old man in the corner. Then I saw her. Sarah. She was standing by the service entrance, holding a heavy silver tray laden with crystal flutes. She was wearing the uniform Bradley had forced upon her, a short black dress with a white lace apron. It was humiliating. It was a costume meant to degrade her, to strip her of her dignity in front of strangers. The fabric was cheap and itchy. The apron still bore the words written in marker Hamilton family Maid. She looked at me, her eyes filled with a mixture of shame and terror. Her lip was trembling. "Dad," she whispered, "please go back to the shed. If he sees you here, he will hurt you." I walked over to her and gently touched her arm. Her skin was cold despite the heat of the kitchen. "Let him try Sarah," I said softly. "Tonight, nobody hurts you. Tonight, you are going to see what your father really does for a living." Before she could answer, the swinging door flew open. Bradley stood there, his face flushed with adrenaline and champagne. "Service," he barked, snapping his fingers. "The guests are thirsty. Get out there, Sarah, and remember to smile. If you spill a drop, I will sell you along with the furniture." He did not see me standing in the shadows. He spun around and marched back to his guests. Sarah took a deep breath, her knuckles white as she gripped the tray. "Go," I whispered. "I am right behind you." She pushed through the doors, and I followed, keeping a safe distance, blending into the background noise of the party. The living room was crowded. There were maybe 20 people, mostly Varga's men posing as investors, and a few of Bradley's old drinking buddies he had invited to show off. The music was loud, a thumping electronic beat that clashed with the elegance of the house. Bradley was in the center of the room holding court. He had a glass of champagne in one hand and the fake deed in the other, waving it around like a flag of victory. "This house is just the beginning, gentlemen," he boasted, his voice slurring slightly. "I have investments all over the city. Crypto, real estate, tech startups. I am building an empire. This sale is just to free up some liquidity for a massive acquisition in Hong Kong." Varga stood by the fireplace, sipping water, watching Bradley with the expression of a scientist observing a lab rat. Sarah moved through the crowd offering drinks. The men took the glasses without looking at her, treating her like furniture. But Bradley was not satisfied with just ignoring her. He wanted to display his dominance. "Hey, you," he shouted, snapping his fingers at Sarah from across the room. "Bring the bottle over here. Mr. Varga's glass is empty." Sarah hurried over, keeping her head down. As she poured the champagne, her hand shook slightly, and a few drops spilled onto the polished wood floor. Bradley gasped, a theatrical sound of shock. "Look at that," he sneered, playing to the crowd. "You clumsy idiot. You are ruining the finish. This is mahogany imported from Brazil. Do you know how much this floor costs? More than your life is worth." He grabbed her by the shoulder, forcing her to her knees. "Clean it up," he ordered. Sarah reached for a cocktail napkin, but Bradley kicked it away. "No," he said, his voice dripping with malice. "Not with a napkin. Use your apron. That is what it is for. Maid." The room went silent. Even Varga's hardened men looked uncomfortable. This was not business. This was cruelty. Sarah hesitated, tears welling in her eyes. She looked up at him, pleading silently. "Do it," Bradley hissed, leaning down, "or I send the email to the FBI tonight." Slowly, painfully, Sarah lowered herself further. She gathered the hem of her apron and began to blot the spilled champagne. The humiliation was palpable, thick in the air like smoke. Bradley stood over her, grinning like a king who had just crushed a rebellion. "See, gentlemen," he said, laughing nervously. "You have to be firm with the help. Otherwise, they walk all over you." Just then, the front door opened and Agnes made her entrance. She was wearing a silver sequined gown that was far too tight and a white fur stole that looked mangy in the bright lights. She had clearly found a stash of alcohol somewhere because she was swaying unsteadily on her heels. She saw the crowd, and her eyes lit up. She saw the champagne, and she saw her son holding court. She thought she had walked back into her old life of luxury. "Bradley, darling," she cooed, staggering into the room. "Is it done? Are we rich again?" Bradley rushed to her, guiding her in. "Almost, mother. Just finalizing the details. Everyone, this is my mother, Agnes." the matriarch of the Hamilton dynasty. Agnes preened, soaking up the attention. She grabbed a glass of champagne from a passing waiter and downed it in one gulp. Then she looked down and saw Sarah on the floor. Her face twisted into a sneer of pure disgust. "What is she doing down there?" Agnes asked, her voice slurring. "Is she praying? Or is she just lazy?" "She spilled the champagne," Mother Bradley said. "She is cleaning it up." Agnes looked at her shoes. They were silver strappy heels, cheap knockoffs she had bought online. There was a tiny speck of dust on the toe of the left one. "Well, while she is down there," Agnes said, her voice loud and piercing, "she can do something useful for once. Sarah, my shoes are dusty. This house is a pigsty. Clean them." Sarah looked up, her face streaked with tears. "Agnes, please. Do not talk back to me, you little leech," Agnes shrieked. "I said clean them. You are the maid, aren't you? That is what the apron says. So do your job. Polish my shoes." She extended her foot, thrusting it into Sarah's face. The room was dead silent now. The cruelty had crossed a line from uncomfortable to monstrous. Bradley did not stop her. He watched, a smirk on his lips, enjoying his mother's display of power. Sarah trembled. She looked at the shoe, then at Agnes, then at Bradley. She was trapped. Broken. She reached out a shaking hand toward the shoe. That was it. The cord snapped. The patience evaporated. I stepped out of the shadows. I did not need the cane anymore. I walked with the stride of a man who owns the earth beneath his feet. I walked past Varga, who nodded almost imperceptibly. I walked past the stunned guests. I walked up to the small stage area where a microphone stand had been set up for Bradley's victory speech. I grabbed the microphone. The feedback squeal cut through the room like a siren, making everyone jump. Agnes froze, her foot still extended. Bradley spun around, his eyes widening when he saw me standing there, not as the beggar, but as the executioner. "That is enough," I said. My voice boomed through the speakers, deep and resonant, commanding absolute authority. It was not the voice of Gus, the shed dweller. It was the voice of Augustus Montgomery, the man who moved mountains. Bradley stared at me, confusion warring with fear on his face. "Get down from there, old man," he shouted, trying to regain control. "You are drunk. Go back to the shed before I have security throw you out." I did not move. I stared him down, my eyes locking onto his until he flinched. "Security?" I asked calmly. "You mean the men you hired to protect you from your own debts? Or do you mean the men standing by the door who work for me?" Bradley looked at the door. Varga's men had shifted. They were no longer acting like guests. They were blocking the exits. Their arms were crossed, their faces grim. "What are you talking about?" Bradley stammered. "Who are you?" I gripped the microphone stand, my knuckles white. "I am the man who paid for this house," I said, my voice rising. "I am the man who bought the car you drive. I am the man whose money you stole, whose signature you forged, whose daughter you tortured." I looked at Agnes, who was slowly lowering her foot, her mouth hanging open. "And you, Agnes, you wanted your shoes shined. You wanted to feel like royalty. Well, look around you. This is not a palace. It is a courtroom, and the verdict is in." I pointed the microphone at Sarah. "Sarah, stand up. Take off that apron. You are done serving these parasites." Sarah looked at me, bewildered by the transformation. But she stood. She untied the apron and let it fall to the floor. It landed on Agnes's shoes, covering them in dirt. Bradley lunged toward the stage, his face purple with rage. "Shut up," he screamed. "Shut him up, Varga. He is ruining the deal." Varga stepped forward. But he did not move toward me. He moved toward Bradley. "There is no deal, Mr. Hamilton," Varga said, his voice cold. "The deed is a fake. The money is not coming, and the police are on their way." Bradley stopped dead. The color drained from his face, leaving him looking like a corpse in a tuxedo. "Fake," he whispered. I smiled. A cold, hard smile. Did you really think I would leave the deed to a $2 million property in a wall safe behind a painting? I asked. Did you really think you were smarter than me? I stepped down from the stage, walking toward him. He backed away, tripping over his own feet. I played you son, I said, towering over him. I played you like a cheap fiddle. I bought your debt. I froze your accounts. I watched you dig your own grave. And now I am here to bury you. Bradley looked around for help. He looked at his mother, but she was cowering in the corner, clutching her fake fur. He looked at his friends, but they were looking at the floor, trying to become invisible. Dad, please, he whimpered, falling to his knees. It was a mistake. I was desperate. I looked down at him with zero pity. Desperation is asking for help, I said. What you did was evil. You enjoyed it. You liked hurting her. You liked making her kneel. I leaned in close so only he could hear. Now it is your turn to kneel, Bradley. But do not pray to me. I am not God, and I do not forgive. Sirens began to wail in the distance, growing louder with every second. The blue and red lights flashed against the windows, illuminating the fear on Bradley's face. The party was over. The reckoning had begun. And I was just getting started. The flashing blue and red lights outside illuminated the terror in the room, painting the walls with the colors of judgment. Bradley was still on his knees, panting like a dog, his tuxedo soaked with sweat. Agnes was huddled in the corner, clutching her cheap fur stole, trying to make herself invisible. The guests were frozen statues of shock, their champagne glasses forgotten in their hands. The front door swung open with a heavy thud. Pierce walked in, flanked by 4 uniformed police officers and 2 men in dark suits with FBI badges clipped to their belts. Pierce looked impeccable in his charcoal suit, holding a leather briefcase like a weapon. He did not look at the chaos around him. He walked straight to me. Mr. Montgomery Pierce said, his voice cutting through the tension like a scalpel. Everything is prepared. He handed me a file. I took it, my eyes never leaving Bradley. Bradley stared at Pierce, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. Pierce, he stammered, his voice cracking. What are you doing here? You represent the Montgomery Group. This is a private matter. Get these cops out of my house. Pierce turned to him, slowly adjusting his glasses. He looked at Bradley with the kind of disdain usually reserved for insects. This is not your house, Mr. Hamilton, Pierce said calmly. And I am here because my client asked me to be. Your client, Bradley asked, confusion warring with panic. Who is your client? Pierce gestured to me with a slight bow of his head. Mr. Augustus Montgomery, the chairman and majority shareholder of the Montgomery Group, and the owner of the ground you are currently kneeling on. The silence that followed was absolute. It was as if the air had been sucked out of the room. Bradley looked at me. He looked at my tattered suit, my old cane, my weathered face. He tried to reconcile the image of Gus, the shed dweller, with the legend of Augustus Montgomery, the tycoon. No, he whispered, shaking his head. No, that is impossible. He is broke. He told us. He lives in a shed. He is a bum. I took a step forward, looming over him. I lied, Bradley, I said, my voice hard as granite. Just like you lied to my daughter. Just like you lied to your investors. Just like you lied to yourself. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a cigar. I bit off the end and spat it onto the floor right next to his knee. I lit it, taking a long, slow drag, letting the smoke drift over his head. I built skyscrapers in the desert while you were playing poker on the internet, I said. I turned sand into gold while you turned my daughter's life into a nightmare. Did you really think a man like me could be broken by a few bad years? Did you really think I would leave my only child unprotected? Agnes let out a strangled cry. She stood up, her face a mask of horror. You have money, she shrieked, her voice shrill and desperate. You have millions. Billions, Agnes, I corrected her. Billions! She stumbled toward me, her hands outstretched, her eyes greedy and pleading. Gus, darling, she wailed. We did not know. If we had known, we would have treated you like a king. We are family. We can fix this. Bradley made mistakes, but we can start over. I looked at her with pure disgust. Start over, I asked. You made my daughter clean your shoes. You made her eat scraps off the floor. You treated me like a stray dog because you thought I had nothing. That is who you are, Agnes. You only respect money. And now that you know I have it, you think you can buy my forgiveness. I turned to the police officers. Get them out of my sight, I said. Agnes lunged at me, trying to grab my arm, but one of the officers stepped in front of her, blocking her path. Do not touch him, ma'am, the officer said, his hand on his holster. Bradley was still on his knees, staring at the floor, his world collapsing around him. He looked up at me, tears streaming down his face. Dad, he whimpered. Please. I was just trying to survive. I was scared. You were not scared, I said, leaning down until we were face to face. You were cruel. You enjoyed it. You liked the power. You liked seeing her beg. Well, look at you now, Bradley. Who is begging? I straightened up and turned to the crowd of stunned guests. Get out, I roared. All of you. This party is over. If you are not gone in 2 minutes, I will have you arrested for trespassing. The guests scrambled for the door, tripping over each other in their haste to escape the wrath of Augustus Montgomery. Varga and his men stayed blocking the way, ensuring Bradley and Agnes could not run. Pierce opened his briefcase and pulled out a stack of documents. Mr. Hamilton, he said, his voice devoid of emotion. These are the warrants. Fraud, embezzlement, forgery, elder abuse, and thanks to Mr. Montgomery's cooperation with the IRS, tax evasion on a massive scale. Bradley's head dropped to his chest. He knew it was over. The charade was finished. The curtain had fallen, and there was no applause, only the sound of handcuffs clicking shut. I nodded to Pierce, and he connected his tablet to the massive projection screen that Bradley had set up for his victory speech. The room went dim as the first image flickered to life. It was a bank statement, magnified so every person in the room could see the numbers clearly. It showed the secret trust account I had established for Sarah. It showed the balance of $4.8 million. And then it showed the withdrawals, hundreds of them, siphoning the money away until nothing remained but zeros. Pierce tapped the screen. This is the money you stole, Bradley. You forged your wife's signature 112 times. You bought cars. You bought watches. You bought the suit you are wearing right now while your wife wore rags. Bradley shook his head violently, sweat flying from his face. No, that is not true. I was investing it. I was managing it for her. Pierce swiped to the next slide. It was a video file. The grain was grainy, but the image was unmistakable. It was footage from the hidden camera I had installed in the living room yesterday morning. It showed Agnes sitting on the sofa eating chocolates while Sarah scrubbed the floor. It showed Agnes kicking Sarah in the shoulder because she missed a spot. It showed Bradley laughing as he poured a drink over Sarah's head. A gasp went through the room. The few remaining guests who hadn't fled looked at the screen in horror. Agnes covered her mouth, her face pale as a ghost. That is a lie, she shrieked. That is doctored. I never touched her. She is clumsy. She falls. I stepped forward, my voice cutting through her lies. We have 3 weeks of footage, Agnes. We have audio of you calling her a slave. We have video of you selling her mother's jewelry online. Pierce swiped to the final image. It was the document that broke Sarah's heart all over again. The loan agreement. The piece of paper Bradley had used to convince Sarah that I was a criminal and that she had to work to pay off my debt. This, Pierce announced, is a complete fabrication. There was no debt. There was no embezzlement. Mr. Montgomery has never owed a dime to anyone in his life. You created this document, Bradley, to enslave your own wife. You used her love for her father to turn her into a servant. Sarah let out a sob that sounded like something tearing inside her chest. She looked at the screen, then at Bradley. The realization hit her with the force of a physical blow. She had suffered for nothing. She had starved for a lie. The FBI agent stepped forward, his badge catching the light. "Bradley Hamilton," he said, his voice booming. "You are under arrest for wire fraud, bank fraud, identity theft, and human trafficking. You have the right to remain silent. I suggest you use it because your father-in-law has provided us with a terabyte of evidence against you." The officers moved in, grabbing Bradley by the arms. He fought them, his legs kicking uselessly. He looked at me, his eyes wide with the panic of a man watching his life end. "Dad, wait," he screamed, struggling against the handcuffs. "I can explain. It was just a misunderstanding. I was going to pay it back, I swear." He threw himself toward me, dragging the officers with him until he was on his knees at my feet. He grabbed the hem of my trousers, his fingers digging into the fabric. "Please, Gus. I am family. You cannot send me to prison. I will die in there. Look at me. I am your son." I looked down at him. I looked at the man who had beaten my daughter, the man who had stolen her youth, the man who had turned my gift into a curse. I kicked his hands away. "I do not have a son," I said, my voice cold as the grave. "I have a daughter, and you broke her." "But I can fix it," he pleaded, snot running down his face. "I will sign the house over. I will sign everything over. Just let me go. Please, Gus, have mercy." I leaned down until my face was inches from his. "Mercy is for the innocent, Bradley. You are not innocent. You are a parasite, and I am the cure." I signaled to the officers. "Take him away." They hauled him to his feet, dragging him toward the door. He screamed and cried, begging for a second chance, begging for a miracle. But there were no miracles tonight, only consequences. As they dragged him out the door, he looked back one last time, his eyes locking with Sarah's. He opened his mouth to manipulate her one last time, to beg her to save him. Sarah turned her back on him. The door slammed shut, cutting off his screams. The room fell silent, save for the sound of Agnes whimpering in the corner. I turned to Pierce. "One down," I said. "One to go." Agnes tried to slip away in the silence that followed the slamming door. She clutched her imitation fur stole around her neck and took small, quiet steps toward the exit, hoping to fade into the night like a bad memory. She almost made it to the foyer. "Mrs. Hamilton," I said, my voice stopping her dead in her tracks. "You are forgetting something." She froze. She turned around slowly, her face a mask of crumbling plaster. Her mascara was running down her cheeks in black rivulets, making her look like a melting wax figure. "I have nothing to say to you," she hissed, trying to summon her old arrogance but failing miserably. "I am leaving. My son is a criminal, apparently, but I am innocent. I am going home to my condo." I looked at Pierce. He stepped forward, checking a notification on his tablet. "I am afraid that is not possible, Mrs. Hamilton," Pierce said, his tone conversational but deadly. "We just received confirmation from the bank. Your condo has been foreclosed." Agnes's eyes bulged. "What? That is impossible. I own it." "You did own it," Pierce corrected, "until 6 months ago when you signed power of attorney over to your son. He used your property as collateral for a high-interest loan to pay off a bookie in Reno. He defaulted last week. The bank changed the locks an hour ago. Your clothes, your furniture, your jewelry, it is all being seized to pay his debts." She staggered back, grabbing the back of a chair to steady herself. "No," she whispered. "No, he wouldn't. He is my son." "He is a thief, Agnes," I said, walking toward her. "And he learned it from you. You leeched off him while he leeched off me. You demanded a lifestyle he could not afford, so he stole to keep you happy. You ate my daughter's food while she starved. You made her scrub your floors while you sat on her furniture. And now you have nothing. Zero. You are homeless, Agnes. She looked around the room, searching for an ally, searching for pity. But the room was empty of everything but judgment. She looked at Sarah. Sarah, darling, she pleaded, her voice cracking. You can't let them do this. I am an old woman. Where will I go? I have nowhere. Sarah looked at the woman who had tormented her for 8 years. The woman who had called her a slave. The woman who had treated her like dirt. Sarah's face was stone. You can go to a shelter, Agnes, Sarah said quietly. Or maybe you can find a bridge. I heard they are very spacious this time of year. Agnes let out a wail of despair. She dropped to her knees, not in prayer, but in defeat. I walked over to the pile of trash in the corner where Sarah had discarded her uniform. I reached down and picked up the filthy torn apron. The one with Hamilton family Maid scrawled across the front in black marker. I walked back to Agnes and tossed it onto her lap. You forgot this, I said. She looked down at the rag with horror, as if I had thrown a snake on her. What is this? She stammered. It is your resume, I said, cold and final. You have no money. You have no home. You have no family. If you want to eat tomorrow, you are going to have to work. And since you like clean floors so much, I suggest you start scrubbing. I signaled to the security guards. Get her out of here, and throw her shoes in the trash. She can walk out barefoot, just like she made my daughter serve her. The guards hoisted her up by her arms. She kicked and screamed, cursing my name, cursing her son, cursing the world that had finally given her exactly what she deserved. They dragged her through the foyer and threw her out the front door. I walked to the window and watched. She stood on the driveway barefoot in the dirt, clutching that dirty apron to her chest. The floodlights clicked off, leaving her in the darkness. She looked at the house one last time, then turned and limped away into the night, alone and broken. The queen had lost her crown, and the only thing she had left was the uniform of the servant she had despised. The silence in the house was heavy, but it was no longer oppressive. It was the silence of a battlefield after the war has been won. Sarah stood in the center of the room, looking at the empty space where her tormentors had stood. She was trembling, not from fear, but from the adrenaline leaving her body. I walked over to her and wrapped her in a bear hug. For the first time in 8 years, she let go. She buried her face in my shoulder and sobbed. It was a guttural sound, a purging of 8 years of pain, fear, and humiliation. I held her tight, stroking her hair, until the sobs turned into quiet hiccups. It is over, Sarah, I whispered. You are safe. You are free. She pulled back and looked at me, her eyes red but clear. What do we do now, Dad? I smiled, reaching for the leather portfolio Pierce had left on the table. Now, I said, handing it to her, we get to work. She opened the folder. Inside were documents transferring ownership of a majority stake in the Montgomery Group to her. But there was another document on top. A deed of purchase for the investment firm where Bradley had pretended to be a partner. The firm he had used as a front for his lies. I bought it this morning, I said. The partners were happy to sell when they found out their star consultant was being investigated by the FBI. It is yours, Sarah. You are the new chairwoman. Me, she asked, her voice shaky. Dad, I don't know how to run a company. I have been scrubbing floors for 8 years. I looked at her hands, the hands that had been raw and bleeding hours ago. You survived hell, Sarah. You have more grit in your little finger than those board members have in their entire bodies. You know the value of $1 because you had to beg for one. You know how to spot a liar because you lived with the king of liars. You are ready. 1 week later, I stood in the lobby of the Hamilton Investment Group, now a subsidiary of Montgomery Enterprises. The marble floors were polished to a mirror shine. The air smelled of expensive coffee and ambition. The automatic doors slid open, and Sarah walked in. She was unrecognizable. The matted hair was gone, replaced by a sleek, sharp bob that framed her face like a helmet. The rags were gone, replaced by a tailored navy blue power suit that cost more than Bradley's car. She did not walk with a limp anymore. She walked with the stride of a predator. Her heels clicked against the marble, a rhythm of absolute authority. I watched from the mezzanine as she approached the security desk, but she was interrupted. A figure stepped out from behind a pillar. It was Bradley. He had been released on bail pending his trial. He looked like a ghost. His suit was wrinkled, his face unshaven, his eyes hollow and desperate. He had been waiting for her. "Sarah." He called out, his voice cracking. "Sarah, please. I need to talk to you. I have nowhere to go." They took everything. He rushed toward her, hands outstretched, begging for a crumb of the life he had stolen. Sarah did not flinch. She did not stop walking. She did not even blink. She looked straight ahead, her gaze fixed on the elevator doors. "Sarah, baby, please," Bradley pleaded, trying to grab her sleeve. "I can change. I can work for you. I will do anything. I will clean the floors. Just give me a chance." Sarah stopped. She turned her head slowly and looked at him. There was no hate in her eyes. There was no anger. There was nothing. It was the look one gives to a stain on the carpet before calling the cleaners. She turned to the head of security, a massive man who had been watching the interaction closely. "Mr. Henderson," she said, her voice cool and crisp. "Why is there trash in my lobby?" Bradley gasped as if she had slapped him. "Trash, Sarah. I am your husband." "Ex-husband," she corrected him. "And current defendant." She looked back at Henderson. "Remove him," she ordered. "And if he returns, call the police and have his bail revoked." "Yes, Ms. Montgomery," Henderson said. Two guards stepped forward, grabbing Bradley by the arms. He started to scream, shouting her name, begging, pleading, but Sarah had already turned away. She walked toward the elevators, the doors opening for her as if by magic. She stepped inside and pressed the button for the penthouse suite. As the doors closed, she looked up and saw me watching her. She gave me a small, almost imperceptible nod. It was not a smile. It was a promise. The victim was dead. The queen had risen. I watched the elevator ascend, carrying my daughter to the top of the world where she belonged. Down below, Bradley was being dragged out onto the street, kicking and screaming into the gutter. Order had been restored. The scales had been balanced. And Augustus Montgomery could finally rest. Family is not defined by blood, but by loyalty and respect. For years, I thought providing financial security was enough to protect my daughter, but I was wrong. True strength is not found in a bank account. It is found in the courage to walk away from those who devalue us, even if they share our last name. We teach people how to treat us, and sometimes the most powerful act of self-love is to become the villain in their story, to be the hero in your own. Never set yourself on fire to keep ungrateful people warm. If you enjoyed seeing justice served cold, hit that like button, subscribe for more stories of revenge and redemption, and tell me in the comments if you have ever had to cut a toxic family member out of your life to save yourself.